For 70 years, people have been walking into work at Woodside. These days, Australia's biggest energy company employs more than 4,000 people all over the world, from Western Australia's Pilbara to the Gulf of Mexico, and now Senegal, where Woodside is helping the African nation deliver its first offshore oil project. The sun never sets on Woodside's global business operations. It's hard to believe that it all began in a small town in coastal Victoria. The world was a different place back then.
It's just so amazing looking at the faces of people who knew they were playing a role in building Australia's future. It is absolutely phenomenal.
But the one thing that hasn't changed in 7 decades is the demand for reliable, affordable energy and the Aussie grit and determination to deliver it.
It really is quite amazing that we went from this scrappy little explorer to the big company that we are today.
The Woodside story is quite remarkable, and in the next half hour I'll show you how a team of talented engineers turned a brash young explorer into one of the world's largest energy companies. We'll also look at why Woodside's products are as important today as they were when they first started out 70 years ago, and the role gas will play in what's known as the energy transition. The story of Woodside begins here in Victoria in the 1950s. It was founded in 1954 in July, named after this town, the tiny town of Woodside. But it was close to the company's oil leases and also the site of Australia's first oil field. Oil fever had gripped the nation following the Rough Range oil discovery near Exmouth in WA. Woodside began drilling for oil in Gippsland, but it failed.
Back in those days, it was largely looking at rock outcrops and then going offshore. It was a bit of guesswork and just hoping you might find something based on trends of where rivers had been over time.
Woodside achieved only modest success in its early exploration.
What's really impressive is that we started off life as a small explorer with a dream of striking it big and finding oil in Victoria. And by all accounts, like many explorers, we shouldn't have made it.
Leading the company at the time was a powerful figure, the stockbroker and chair of Woodside, Jeff Donaldson.
He was an imposing man, always upright, 6'8.5". He had a presence. He had drive and energy and enthusiasm, and so did the company.
It was a question of continually, doggedly proceeding to do what we set out to do. And the spirit was never giving up. It was persistence and a continual belief that we would succeed. I suppose the most important single event was the obtaining of the exploration licenses that are now the Northwest Shelf.
A decision to move the focus of Woodside's efforts from the east coast of Australia to the west changed everything. Just describe the transition for Woodside to move from Bass Strait and its history there in Gippsland to then go to the northwest of Australia. Even that was almost a crazy decision in some ways.
It absolutely was a bold decision. The official geologist of Australia said there was no gas or oil to be found in the northwest, but our chief geologist had conviction. So for £100, we picked up a license to explore over a vast part of the offshore.
An area of around 370,000 square kilometres. Just for some perspective, that's the equivalent of the landmass of the state of Victoria and 2 Tasmanias. It's vast. The acquisition of these exploration rights would transform the company's fortune forever. An oil discovery at Legendre, off the coast of Western Australia in 1968, became Woodside's first success in its exploration of what we now call the North West Shelf. Back then, oil, not gas, was the name of the game.
Nobody wanted gas. Oil was a commodity that was easy to trade. You could ship it all around the world, even in the 1960s. Gas, at that point in time, was really confined to domestic markets. The hunt was very much for oil.
But in 1971, Woodside would go on and make major gas discoveries north of Broome and at North Rankin and Angel, north of Karratha. A pivotal moment that would focus minds on new possibilities.
So North Rankin, the discovery of gas there, really sparked an opportunity to do something different with the gas. We had to work closely with our joint venture partners. We had to find joint venture partners. We had to line up a group of customers. Importantly, the first customer actually was the state of Western Australia that had the courage of conviction to build a pipeline from Karratha all the way to Bunbury, with the anticipation that if there was a gas pipeline there, industry would develop off it.
To develop this giant Northwest Shelf gas processing plant no doubt took guts by Woodside and its joint venture partners. But what arguably took even more guts was a decision by Woodside, then a small and emerging energy company, to take on this whole project as its operator. Today, the Northwest Shelf project is marking 40 years as a successful joint venture. It's an enormous project that would set out to supply natural gas not just to Australians, but also the massive Asian economies, including Japan. But to realise the opportunity to sell gas overseas, Woodside and its joint venture partners negotiated a deal with the governments of the day to secure domestic gas supply. It was here in 1977 that a major breakthrough took place, because it was then in Australia's old Parliament House that the federal government and opposition came to a bipartisan agreement. Not just that, but every other state government also agreed. This was sometimes called the anchor that created the Northwest Shelf project. And it came with ground rules, including taxation allowances, foreign ownership, but importantly, the ability for Australia to sell its gas to overseas customers. Richard Court's father, Sir Charles Court, was Premier at the time and secured the deal for Western Australia.
His government was very keen to diversify the state away from its dependence on collie coal and imported oil. But at that time, Woodside was proving up these large gas reserves, and that then became their focus. And at the same time, they ensured that gas reserves were quarantined for the future for domestic use in Western Australia. And that's basically what we call the domestic gas reservation policies that governments following his have all committed to.
A third of all Woodside's gas has gone into our domestic market, which means it's powered our homes, it's powered our industry, and has been a really important part of securing Western Australia's economic future.
The first gas production for onshore use in Western Australia was achieved in 1984. Its impact was immense.
The Northwest Shelf project was a groundbreaking project and a nation-building project. It was a phenomenal collaboration to be able to get the project developed and spawned the LNG industry in Australia.
LNG, or liquefied natural gas, was a brand new technology for Australia, and it started at the Karratha gas plant, where the gas was cooled to minus 160 degrees Celsius, turned into a liquid form, put on ships such as this one, and sent overseas. At Woodside, it was then Managing Director Charles Allen who successfully raised the finance Woodside needed to establish the Karratha gas plant as an export operation.
He really was a force in developing our natural gas. and our LNG facilities.
There are still Woodside employees today who were there in Karratha the first time an LNG ship, the Northwest Sandling, set sail for Japan with a cargo in 1989.
There was a lot of fanfare, obviously. The workboats and the rig tenders had their cannons going, spraying water everywhere, and there was helicopters buzzing around everywhere, you know.
The big thing about it was that you could see the fruits of the labour. Sometimes you can be so isolated in your job and kind of forget the bigger picture, that we're making a difference, sending energy from Australia to fuel the world.
Woodside's effective operational management of Australian LNG facilities and their LNG supply is pivotal to ensuring reliable energy supply to Japan.
Woodside's ability to deliver a reliable gas supply to its energy partners is something the company still takes enormous pride in today.
In the past 40 years of operations, KGP have achieved over 6,000 cargoes, and we've been supplying energy to WA for the last 40 years.
The great majority of Australians need companies such as Woodside because they are the key to our future wealth and the opportunities for our children and our grandchildren, and we should never forget that.
Not least because of the economic contribution the joint venture's made to Australia's economy.
Tax is amazing. We've paid more than 40 billion Australia in tax just from the venture.
Hang on, 40 billion with a B.
40 billion with a B. And that's not including things like payroll tax, it's not including the tax that our contractors pay. So a huge economic contribution from this venture.
The taxes paid by Woodside, you know, they're the key to the federal budget, together with the resources sector generally. Without companies such as Woodside, how else will we pay for health and education, childcare, issue of aged care, all those community expectations?
The company could have continued to operate the successful joint venture quite comfortably, but true to its roots and prepared to have a go, Woodside came up with a different idea. This place, Pluto. Don Volti was chief executive at the time when Woodside's head of exploration appeared in his office late one night with a plan to go all in on the gas field.
I remember the keys being thrown out. He says, "Those are the keys to my house. That's my whole life in those keys." He said, "This is the one you bet the house on, Don. This is going to be it." After we confirmed the size and did all this, we knew it was an LNG project. We knew it was going to be an offshore structure. We naturally felt like this gas was going to come in and go to Northwest Shelf.
In order to negotiate a better deal on Pluto gas for shareholders, Don Volti suggested it would build its own LNG plant unless the joint venture made Woodside a better offer.
We were bluffing. And at the end of the day, we weren't bluffing. We knew we were going to develop it, build it. The good news is it worked out right for us.
It was a $12 billion project. So $12 billion, that was spending $10 million a day, 7 days a week for 3 years. That's how big it was, and it worked out very well. We became much more professional. We were always very good as an engineering company. The North Rankin was built as a Rolls-Royce. During Don's period, we became more commercially minded as well as engineering minded.
It's a great credit to everyone who was involved in those days in the Pluto project development that they pulled it off in record time.
Today, Woodside workers take great pride in working at the Pluto LNG facility.
And working here at Pluto on a plant like this, it's only 12 years old, it's a very new plant, it's state-of-the-art technology, fantastic people, we've got such great reliability, great safety.
And it worked out very well for Woodside and its shareholders. Astonishingly, the LNG operation at Pluto is managed 1,500 kilometres away at Woodside's global headquarters in the Perth CBD.
We're really proud of this facility. It's the first 100% remotely operated facility in the world. We definitely had to back ourselves to build this and to deliver it.
And we see it as an enabler of not only how we want to work today, but how we want to work into the future as well.
Building on the success of Pluto, Woodside is now expanding its operations in Karratha to develop the Scarborough Energy Project.
Scarborough is phenomenal. So it's a very large gas field. It's located about 400 kilometers offshore, so even farther than the Northwest Shelf, in much deeper water depth.
To process the new gas from the Scarborough field, Woodside is building a new processing facility at the Pluto site.
How many people are on site at the moment building this?
So at the moment we've got just over 1,000 people on site, and we'll continue to ramp that up. The Scarborough Energy Project jobs just in WA number over 3,000. When we get into normal operations, that'll be sitting over 300 for our sustained workforce.
We're always about trying to find that next opportunity. Scarborough, in many ways, is that next big opportunity in the Northwest. What I'm excited about is we've done a few things in the last few years that give us a bit more diversification. So the BHP Petroleum merger is probably at the top of the list.
In 2022, the purchase of BHP's worldwide oil and gas assets would transform Woodside's enterprise into a truly global business.
That doubled our size, strengthened our balance sheet, gave us access to resources in North America, both assets as well as human talent. And we last year took a decision to invest in the Trion field offshore Mexico. So we're a much bigger, more capable organization today. But again, we're always looking for the next thing.
I think I and the board were pretty excited about what that would potentially do for Woodside. And I think it's actually achieved more than we thought it would at the time we started considering it. We brought these two really good organisations together. We've increased our field of operation. We've brought really good people into the business. It's given us a balance sheet. It's given us a portfolio of assets, which I think set us up really, really well for an exciting future.
Building on Woodside's experience as an oil producer, the energy company has recently helped the West African nation of Senegal achieve its very first offshore oil production.
We're very excited about Senegal, so we bought into that opportunity in 2016. In early 2020, we took our final investment decision, and super excited that we just started oil production in June of this year. So a real landmark for not just Woodside, but for the nation of Senegal as well.
The floating production, storage and offloading vessel, called an FPSO, stands to offer billions of dollars in benefits to the people of Senegal.
To date, we have spent approximately $177 million with local suppliers. We have generated more than 4,400 jobs for Senegalese people and delivered 250,000 training hours for locals. The reason we do this is we want to maintain positive long-term relationships with the nation and with the communities where we operate.
For evidence of the impact a world-class resource project can have at a local level over time, you need look no further than Karratha.
Karratha's our home. We believe that people, where we can, should live close to their place of work. Offshore is a different story, but for people that work at our plants, for people who work in our offices, we want them living in the communities, we want them raising their families there, we want them participating, being involved in the schools, being involved in sporting clubs, giving back to the community, and I think that makes it a wonderful place to live.
Woodside is clearly invested in being a part of the community. They have a large number of employees who live in the community and they support that. They're also providing us with funding and support in running our services and creating great infrastructure that creates a much more livable community. So Woodside touches the Karratha community in a lot of different ways. We have a really vibrant community and vibrant community events because of Woodside's contribution.
Ensuring First Nations engagement, consultation and strong relationships is paramount to the success of projects in Australia, and Woodside's approach is arguably an exemplar in how big corporations can get it right.
It's extremely important. We're very privileged to be able to produce LNG on Murujuga and have our offices in Whadjuk Noongar land. So having that respect and that respectful engagement with the Indigenous communities is incredibly important. We work closely with them to understand what are the sorts of things that we can do to help fulfill their aspirations for thriving and healthy communities. And really pleased with the partnerships we've developed.
We've been very fortunate to work through a work readiness program. And this year we've had 16 graduates come onto this work site who have previously had no or low work experience before. And for us, that's a sustaining future that we're providing for not just those 16 individuals, but their families as well.
I see more now young Indigenous people coming into this workforce, so it's like, yeah, it's a good change over these years.
Whether it's supporting reconciliation with First Nations, cultural heritage research or the surf life-saving nippers, Woodside strives to find a way to help benefit every community in which it operates.
It is thanks to partners like Woodside who share a commitment and passion for beach safety that we are able to deliver on our mission of saving lives and building great communities along the West Australian coast.
A partnership where many Australians might be familiar with the Woodside brand is in the world of AFL footy, where the energy company has sponsored the Fremantle Dockers since 2010.
One thing that's going to be divisive, though, is you had to pick a football team in Australia. Why did Woodside pick the Fremantle Dockers? What do you get out of that?
Look, that partnership is more than just the name on a jumper. Actually, it goes back to being a very significant community investment.
While we're a secure and stable organisation now, that certainly wasn't always the case, and particularly when Woodside jumped on board all those years ago. In that time, Woodside's been paramount in ensuring the growth of our club on a whole broad range of levels, but in particularly championing our commitment to our reconciliation as Indigenous programs partner. What a lot of people don't see is Woodside's commitment to our next generation academies. And whilst helping us produce the next level of champions, they also provide great support to people at a participation level. Young men and women, boys and girls playing our great game, achieving great health and wellbeing outcomes and social inclusivity. That's the type of partnership that Woodside provide us and our communities that we live and play in.
Recently, Woodside set a target to invest $5 billion in new energy products and lower carbon services by 2030.
Opportunities to produce hydrogen, opportunities to produce ammonia that might be used in power generation instead of coal. So we know we need to be a constructive player in the transition. But I think the work we're doing today is adding value to people's lives and to communities all around the world.
I think there's innovation in the company that is yet to be shown to the external world, or the external world's yet to fully understand what Woodside's been doing in AI and robotics and new energy around some of the hydrogen, some of the battery technology, solar technology and so forth. So I think they're all things that will surprise people over time.
There are some people who would say that we don't need gas in our energy future, that we can transition straight to renewables. What's your sense of that?
It's just not true. And if it's not true for us, it's even more not true for Southeast Asian countries that are currently relying on coal. We have a decision to make. Do we want to lower global emissions? If that's the case, we need to lean heavily into gas because it's going to play an important role to make sure that those countries can lower their emissions and move to a renewable energy future as well.
We know the world needs to respond to climate change, and we know an energy company like Woodside needs to play a role in that response. We look very carefully at how the world might tackle climate change and understand how the world's energy mix is going to evolve. And it's absolutely true that we need to invest more collectively in things like renewables, wind, solar, batteries, nuclear technology, these low emissions technologies. But we're not going to be able to switch off today's energy system tomorrow. And gas particularly has a role to play. It's a feedstock for many manufacturing processes. And when used in power generation, it can complement renewables, which obviously don't work if the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing, with half the emissions intensity of coal. We have firm conviction that gas is going to play a very meaningful role for decades to come.